The General Assembly will now take a decision on draft resolution A/ES10/L30/Rev1 entitled Admission of New Members to the United Nations. A recorded vote has been requested. We shall now begin the voting process. Those in favor of draft resolution A/ES10/L30/revision 1, please signify. Those against and abstentions.
The General Assembly is now voting on draft resolution A/ES10/L30/revision 1, entitled Admission of New Members to the United Nations. Will all delegations confirm that their votes are accurately reflected on the screen? The voting has been completed. Please lock the machine. 142.
The result of the vote is as follows. In favor, 143. Against, 9. Abstentions, 25. Draft resolution A/ES10/L30/Rev1 is adopted. Before giving the floor for explanations of vote after the vote, may I remind delegations that explanations of vote are limited to 10 minutes and should be made by delegations from their seats. I now give the floor to the delegation of Singapore.
Mr. President, the General Assembly has just adopted an important resolution expressing support for Palestine's membership in the United Nations. Both sides. Breakdown of the fragile trust between both peoples and the shattered path for achieving a comprehensive, just, and durable solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Both Israel and Palestine have the right to exist and to live in peace within secure and recognized boundaries, free from threats or acts of force. Singapore joins the rest of the international community in calling on leaders of both sides to show leadership and courage and take the difficult but necessary steps towards a two-state solution. The prospect for peace between Israel and Palestine have become even bleaker, and this is precisely why we must do everything possible to cease hostilities and revive efforts to work towards a two-state solution. The heinous terrorist attacks by Hamas on the 7th of October last year brutally killed over 1,200 Israelis and other nationalities, with the taking of more than 200 hostages, many of whom remain in captivity. These attacks cannot be condoned or justified by any history of injustice, enmity, or conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, and Singapore has repeatedly condemned them. In response, Israel has exercised its legitimate right of self-defense, but Israel's military actions have gone too far and caused far too much human suffering and property destruction. The death of around 35,000 Palestinians and the humanitarian disaster in Gaza is tragic. The result of these events has been outrage on both sides, breakdown of the fragile trust between both peoples, and the shattering of any sense of security for both Israelis and Palestinians. As a friend of both sides, we are deeply grieved by this state of affairs. Singapore's vote today reflects our heartfelt desire to see both parties resume direct negotiations in good faith, demonstrating courage to take the tremendously difficult but essential first steps towards a two-state solution and a durable peace. We recognize that this will be a painful and long-drawn process. The work to rebuild trust and restart dialogue must begin now. Both sides have legitimate rights and shared responsibilities, and difficult compromises must be struck through direct negotiations. Secondly, Singapore's support for the resolution is in line with our consistent and long-standing support for the principles of international law and the implementation of all relevant UN resolutions. The General Assembly Resolution 181, amongst other things, divided the mandate of Palestine into separate Arab and Jewish states. The UN Security Council Resolutions 242 and 338 called for the withdrawal of Israel's armed forces from territories occupied in the Six-Day War. Subsequent resolutions have referred explicitly to a two-state solution. Unfortunately, these resolutions have never been implemented. Thirdly, we support the right of the Palestinian people to a homeland. In 1988, Singapore welcomed the Palestinian Liberation Organization's proclamation of the State of Palestine. We did so in the context of a two-state solution. At that time, the Palestine National Council had expressed support for an international conference in accordance with UNSC Resolutions 242 and 338. Most importantly, the PLO explicitly rejected terrorism and recognized the right of the State of Israel to exist. We saw these moves as progress towards a durable solution for this long-standing conflict. Fourthly, in supporting this resolution we adopted today, Singapore reiterates that terrorism has no place in any process leading to a stable and peaceful political solution. Groups, including Hamas, that continue to deny Israel's existence or refuse to renounce terrorism have no place in a Palestinian state. To create the foundations for a lasting peace, we must restore hope and offer the possibility of peace as an alternative to the endless cycle of violence and retribution. As a friend of both Israel and Palestine, we urge both sides to eschew violence and resume negotiations towards a two-state solution with the help and support of the international community. Mr. President, notwithstanding our support in favor of the resolution, Singapore reserves its position on the scope of the annex to the resolution. In our view, any additional rights and privileges to be granted under the resolution must be granted in a manner that is entirely consistent with the UN Charter. This is important, not only in this case, but also for similar future cases, because the UN Charter, which binds member states, provides for the exercise of certain rights and obligations only by member states. I thank you very much for your attention.
I thank the distinguished representative of Singapore. Before giving the floor to the next speaker, may I call upon all participants to keep their voices down so that we can listen to statements. And I now invite the representative of the United States to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Biden has been clear that sustainable peace in the region can be achieved only through a two-state solution, with Israel's security guaranteed, where Israelis and Palestinians can live side by side with equal measures of freedom and dignity. It remains the U.S. view that unilateral measures at the UN and on the ground will not advance this goal. This General Assembly resolution was no exception, and so the United States voted no. Our vote does not reflect opposition to Palestinian statehood. We have been very clear that we support it and seek to advance it meaningfully. Instead, it is an acknowledgement that statehood will come only from a process that involves direct negotiations between the parties. There is no other path that guarantees Israel's security and future as a democratic Jewish state. There is no other path that guarantees Palestinians can live in peace and with dignity in a state of their own. And there is no other path that leads to regional integration between Israel and all its Arab neighbors, including Saudi Arabia. The United States is committed to intensifying its engagement with the Palestinians and the rest of the region to advance a political settlement that will create a path to Palestinian statehood and subsequent membership in the United Nations. This resolution does not resolve the concerns about the Palestinian membership application raised in April in the Security Council through the Admissions Committee process. The Security Council take up the Palestinians' membership application. As a result of this resolution, there will be a similar outcome. Additionally, the draft resolution does not alter the status of the Palestinians as a non-member state observer mission. Even this unproductive text makes that explicit. As a result of this vote, the Palestinian non-member state observer mission has not gained the right to vote in the General Assembly. It also has not gained the right to put forward candidates in UN organs or to be elected as a member of the Security Council. In short, the Palestinians' non-member state observer mission does not have the same standing as a member state after this vote. In the meantime, the United States will continue to oppose measures that undermine the prospect of a two-state solution. This includes any actions that violate the principles that Secretary Blinken has affirmed repeatedly, that Gaza cannot be a platform for terrorism, that there should be no Israeli reoccupation of Gaza, and that the size of Gaza's territory should not be reduced. We believe a two-state solution coupled with these elements is the best way to achieve a durable peace in the region, along with security for Israelis and Palestinians. It remains the U.S. view that the most expeditious path toward statehood and UN membership for the Palestinian people is through direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority with the support of the United States and other partners. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the delegate of the United States, and I now invite the distinguished delegate of France to take the floor.
President, France voted in favour of the draft resolution proposed by the United Arab Emirates. This provides new rights to the observer state of Palestine within the United Nations. The clarifications provided in the resolution regarding the right to vote and the right to be elected, which are the prerogatives of member states alone, is something that's welcome. France recalls that the procedure for admitting a new member state is defined by the states, by the Charter, and it must not be circumvented. France is in favour of the admission of Palestine as a full member of the United Nations, and that's why we voted in favour of the draft of the resolution presented by Algeria at the Security Council. It is high time to put the work of the United Nations within a perspective of overall political solution to the Israeli political conflict on the basis of a two-state solution. This is the only way of meeting the security needs of Israel and the legitimate aspirations of Palestinians to a state. This is the thinking behind the resolution that we presented to the Security Council. We call on all its members to support it and to support a view to peace. President, France condemns the terrorist attacks of Hamas and other terrorist groups on the 7th of October. France continues to demand a ceasefire and the release of all hostages. It continues to demand full humanitarian access too. The offensive that has started in Rafah risks causing numerous victims and displacing people at a time when nowhere can be deemed safe today in Gaza. There is a risk further of disrupting delivery of aid. France is clearly opposed to this operation. France condemns Hamas's attack on the Kerem Shalom crossing point and recall that all parties must do everything they can to protect civilians and guarantee access for humanitarian aid. President, it is high time to mobilise for a political solution. Thank you very much.
I thank the delegate of France, and I now invite the distinguished delegate of Finland to take the floor.
Finland abstained in the vote on the General Assembly resolution ES 10/L30. The tragic events of the past months have once again demonstrated that lasting peace in the Middle East requires a political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Finland considers the two-state solution the only sustainable way to guarantee the security and the rights of both peoples and to achieve sustainable peace. The entire international community must strive to advance this goal. Sustainable peace requires the realization of the rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination in their own independent state. Finland has been a reliable partner to the Palestinians for decades in supporting the construction of the Palestinian state, both politically and through development cooperation. The international community now needs to create clear steps towards a Palestinian state. Palestine's UN membership is one of these steps. It is of utmost importance that the membership is not merely symbolic, but comes as part of a broad-based plan that produces concrete improvements to the situation of the Palestinians and the security of the whole region. Unfortunately, the international community has not yet agreed on such a plan. Finland wants to see an independent, internationally recognized Palestinian state as a full member of the United Nations as soon as possible. Despite the difficult situation, it is important that all peoples in the region become aware of the necessity of the two-state solution. The leadership of both parties must act in a manner that makes the two-state solution credible in the eyes of the citizens. Mr. President, the protection of civilians must immediately become the highest priority. Israel must stop all its illegal activities in the West Bank and release the Palestinian revenues it is withholding. The Palestinian government needs to implement its reform program. We all must acknowledge openly that there is no return to the status quo ante of 7th of October. Finland continues to call for a sustainable ceasefire in Gaza and the immediate release of all hostages. Ultimately, the benefits of the two-state model clearly outweigh disadvantages for all residents in the region. The peoples of Israel and Palestine deserve a better, secure future, and the Palestinians have the right to take decisions on their own affairs. Thank you, Mr. President.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of Finland, and I now invite the distinguished representative of Australia to take the floor.
Australia welcomes this resolution's unwavering support for the two-state solution of Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security within recognised borders. This is a clear rejection of the goals and methods of Hamas. A two-state solution, Israel and Palestine, is the opposite of what Hamas wants. We condemn Hamas' terrorist attack on Israel and call for the immediate release of all hostages. Australia has long believed a two-state solution offers the only hope for breaking the endless cycle of violence and achieving lasting peace. Like many member states, Australia has been frustrated by the lack of progress. There is a role for the international community to build momentum, set expectations that parties resume negotiations for tangible progress, and to support efforts for a political process. The resolution does not provide membership of the United Nations and retains the status of the permanent observer mission with a modest extension of additional rights. We appreciated our engagement with member states and the Palestinian observer mission to ensure that this was clear. The resolution expresses the General Assembly's aspiration for full Palestinian membership of the United Nations something which must ultimately be recommended by the Security Council consistent with the Charter. While this resolution is not what we would propose, it is for all these reasons that Australia voted yes. Like many other countries, our vote for this resolution is not bilateral recognition of Palestinian statehood. Nevertheless, Australia no longer accepts that recognition can only come at the end of the peace process. We have been clear, there is no role for Hamas in a future Palestinian state. Such a state cannot be in a position to threaten Israel's security. Reform of the Palestinian Authority is required, and direct negotiations will be needed on final status issues, including Jerusalem and borders. We have listened to Israel's concerns. Australia will always remain committed to Israel's right to exist in peace and security. We believe a two-state solution is the only way to assure this. We know this vote won't resolve the immediate crisis. A humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza is needed urgently. The catastrophic humanitarian situation must be addressed, and Hamas must release all hostages. Thank you.
I give the floor next to the distinguished delegate of Germany, after thanking the distinguished delegate of Australia for his statement. Germany, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Germany firmly believes in two states, Israel and Palestine, for two peoples in the Middle East. We share the goal of a Palestinian state. We fully support Palestinians' right to self-determination. Every child, every family deserves to live in peace, in prosperity, and in dignity, and we want the Palestinian people to have their own state. Germany has worked towards that for years, and we will relentlessly continue to do so. Today, immediate action is required, supported by collective international efforts to stop the fighting, to release the hostages, to ensure and guarantee security for Israelis and Palestinians alike, to provide humanitarian assistance, and to end the suffering and the destruction. Without such immediate steps, a Palestinian state will not become a reality. But we want a Palestinian state to exist in reality. Unfortunately, today's vote in the General Assembly will not be able to create a viable Palestinian state, nor will it make peace. If immediate full membership ended all the suffering we are witnessing, we would have today wholeheartedly voted yes. Only direct negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians will lead to sustainable peace in the Middle East and to a two-state reality. And this is why we have abstained today. At this moment of time, let us focus on what is necessary to open an effective road to peace and security for the region, for Israelis and Palestinians alike. Germany is working relentlessly towards this goal. In close coordination with our partners in the region, we are focusing on creating the conditions necessary for a two-state solution. To be very clear, and on this many in this room seem to agree, full UN membership of a Palestinian state is not the beginning nor the end of a political process towards a two-state solution, but it is an integral part of such a political process. Israelis and Palestinians must start agreeing on tangible steps, steps that allow both peoples to live in dignity and security side by side, steps to end the occupation, and to prevent violence and incitement. Today we stand against unilateral measures undermining the prospect for a two-state solution, namely illegal settlement activities in the occupied territories and unprecedented levels of settler violence. We call upon the government of Israel to do its part to keep the two-state solution viable. At the same time, Palestinians need to lay the ground for a viable and legitimate state structure. What is needed is an effective, unified Palestinian Authority determined to live in peace and security with Israel as good neighbors. This will require continuous substantial efforts from all stakeholders. The international community stands ready to take responsibility to ensure that the Palestinian Authority can effectively fulfill this task and guarantee security for Israelis and Palestinians alike. What happened on the 7th of October 2023 must never happen again. Israel's legitimate security concerns must be met, and Palestinians as well as Israelis must be able to live in peace and security. Germany stands ready to support it. Mr. President, in today's important vote, delegations have taken different decisions. None of us is taking this lightly. We all seek to contribute to the same objective: peace and security for every child in Palestine, peace and security for every child in Israel, peace and security for the whole region, and especially a viable two-state solution. Let us therefore join forces to work towards peace. The horrible war in Gaza is a stark reminder that this is the only way forward. Ending the killing in Gaza is of the utmost importance. Hamas must end the terror. This would stop the war. All hostages must be released immediately and unconditionally. Israel must finally allow for humanitarian assistance to reach all innocent men, women, and children in Gaza now. We also call upon Israel to refrain from further escalation in Rafah and to do everything in its power to protect the lives of civilians in Gaza. As every country has the right to self-defense, every country also has the obligation to protect civilians. We cannot wait for the day when the Palestinian people finally have their own state, not just a seat behind a nameplate at the UN. This is what we are working for, and we believe we can only do this together. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Germany for his statement. I now invite the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom to take the floor.
Thank you, President. The United Kingdom remains firmly committed to a two-state solution that guarantees security and stability for both the Israeli and the Palestinian people. As we said in the Security Council last month, we're abstaining on this resolution because we believe that the first step towards achieving this goal is resolving the immediate crisis in Gaza. The fastest way to end the conflict is to secure a deal which gets the hostages out and allows for a pause in the fighting in Gaza. We must then work together to turn that pause into a sustainable, permanent ceasefire. Setting out a horizon for a Palestinian state should be one of the vital conditions for moving from a pause in fighting to a sustainable ceasefire. Recognizing a Palestinian state, including at the UN, should be part of that process. As my Foreign Secretary has said, while this shouldn't be at the start of a new process, it doesn't have to be at the very end of the process. President, we remain deeply concerned about the prospect of a major operation in Rafah. We are clear that we would not support this unless there is a very clear plan for how to protect civilians who must be safe and able to access food, water, and medical care. We have not seen that plan, so in these circumstances, we would not support a major operation in Rafah. The UK is doing all it can to reach a long-term solution to this crisis. In addition to our support for a deal which would secure a pause in the fighting and the immediate release of all hostages, we are pushing as hard as we can to get aid to Palestinian civilians, working with partners to de-escalate the situation in the region and building momentum towards a lasting peace. The UK has offered the Palestinian Authority our support as the new Palestinian government implements much-needed reforms. An effective Palestinian Authority is vital for lasting peace and progress towards a two-state solution. And just as the PA must act, so too must Israel. This means releasing frozen funds, halting settlement expansion, and holding to account those responsible for extremist settler violence. Last week, the UK announced a second package of sanctions targeting individuals and groups directly responsible for egregious violence against Palestinian civilians.
Thank you.
The Israeli authorities must put a stop to this. President, in conclusion, we will continue to work urgently to bring the Gaza conflict to a sustainable end as quickly as possible, and to build a credible and irreversible pathway towards a two-state solution and lasting peace. I thank you.
Wow.
I should like to thank the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom for her statement, and I now give to the floor the distinguished representative of Iceland.
Mr. President, in 2011, Iceland and Palestine established full diplomatic relations after the Icelandic Parliament passed a resolution in support of recognizing the state of Palestine as a sovereign state. Since then, Iceland's position on Palestinian statehood has been clear. Iceland has consistently called for a two-state solution where both Israel and Palestine live side by side in peace and security and mutual recognition. Therefore, we support Palestine's full membership of the United Nations and the call for the Security Council to reconsider the matter favorably. We also call on the Council to do more to live up to its mandate and address the Middle East peace process. This is why we voted in favor of today's resolution. Mr. President, just as Iceland has consistently condemned Hamas's past indiscriminate terrorist attacks, we condemned in the strongest terms the horrific attack on Israel on October the 7th. We continue to call for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages taken in this most fatal attack on Jews since the Holocaust. In 1947, Iceland's first permanent representative to the United Nations was instrumental in passing Resolution 181, envisioning the formation of independent Arab and Jewish states. Subsequently, Iceland supported Israel's admission to the UN in 1949. Ever since, Iceland has reiterated Israel's clear right to defend itself in line with the UN Charter and international law, including international humanitarian law. We also recognize the legitimate security concerns of Israel. Israel's right to exist is beyond debate. We can never forget the horrors of the Holocaust, which led to the creation of the State of Israel, especially now as we face extreme increase in anti-Semitism. At the same time, we recognize the injustice of Israel's illegal settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the blockade of Gaza. We once again call on Israel to put an end to this and take action to stop settler violence. Freedom of media also needs to be respected. Mr. President, ultimately international law provides states with rights and obligations. Both are sacred. Iceland expects these two states, Israel and Palestine, to enjoy and respect both. In the past months, the world has witnessed hindered access for humanitarian aid, water and power to Gaza. There have been reports of civilian infrastructure and hospitals being used for purposes that can deprive them of the protection under international humanitarian law. And we have witnessed totally unacceptable losses of the lives of civilians, children, aid and health workers, journalists, and UNRWA staff. All of these constitute serious violations of international humanitarian law. The figures are shocking. After 6 months of war, over 35,000 people have died in Gaza. More than 2 million civilians are desperately in need of life-saving aid. Civilian infrastructure is in ruins. And if Israel's large-scale military campaign in Rafah materializes, the situation is bound to get even worse. We therefore urge Israel to hold its operations in Rafah. Iceland condemns all violations of international law, including international humanitarian law. And again, international law provides states with rights and obligations. Both are sacred. We must restore respect for international law, including humanitarian law, which binds all parties to armed conflicts and cannot be derogated from. The civilians in Gaza must be protected in accordance with the legally binding orders issued by the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Security Council resolutions 2712, 2720, and 2748 must be implemented. Mr. President, mindful of how seemingly insurmountable grievances have been overcome during our lifetimes, there is hope for the two states to live side by side in peace. The people of Palestine and Israel deserve to live in peace and security in prosperous and democratic societies. They deserve to live without fear of aggression or terrorist attacks. We therefore call on Israel and Hamas to urgently agree to and implement a sustained ceasefire and commend all efforts to try to bring an agreement to fruition. Today's resolution will not immediately change the situation on the ground, but it recognizes that peace will not be achieved through unilateral means. It calls for more to be done and determines that there is no better path towards peace than the two-state solution. In this context, Mr. President, Palestine should qualify and be welcomed as the 194th UN member state. And I thank you.
I should like to thank the distinguished delegate of Iceland for his statement, and I now...
Mr. President, Poland understands and has supported the Palestinian people's aspiration for self-determination and statehood for decades. We recognize the Palestinian Declaration of Independence in 1988. We also remain on the side of peace and stability in the Middle East. Both Palestinians and Israelis have lived in fear and suffering for much too long. Mr. President, our country is committed and ready to work tirelessly with the parties and regional and international partners to promote a return to a meaningful diplomatic process leading to a negotiated two-state solution built upon the internationally agreed parameters. The solution which will fulfill the aspiration of both sides. The solution where the State of Israel and independent, democratic, contiguous, sovereign and viable State of Palestine live side by side in peace and security and mutual recognition. In that context, we stress that terrorism aimed at the civilian population is never justified and cannot be tolerated under any circumstances, and that every country has the right to defend itself and its citizens against terrorism in compliance with international law. This is why Poland constantly raises these issues at the UN and all other relevant fora. However, Mr. President, we notice with great concern that the perspective of implementation of the two-state solution seems to be further than ever. Thus, we need to continue supporting Palestinian statehood in accordance with international law. We consider the General Assembly resolution on Palestine's membership in the United Nations as a right and important step in this direction. And this is why we have decided to vote in favor of the document. Mr. President, as a long-standing advocate of the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, as stipulated in the UN Charter, Poland is glad that the adopted document provides additional rights and privileges to the State of Palestine. We perceive this enhanced status as the next step in Palestine's pursuit to a full UN membership in accordance with Article 4 of the UN Charter. We believe that this pursuit is an inalienable right of the Palestinian people. We also believe it is the only realistic way to bring the lasting peace and security that both Palestinians and Israelis fully deserve. And I thank
the distinguished representative of Poland for his statement.
Yeah, so there we go. Other countries, they vote in favor of the Palestinian to be given the right to be recognized as a state. And others also, they abstain, especially Germany and United Kingdom, they also abstained, but they strongly condemned both Hamas and also strongly condemned what Israel doing in Palestinian. And in some countries, they said that this is just to remind them of the Holocaust. So when Israel was accepted in 1949 as a state, as Israel was accepted in the United Nations as a sovereignty state in 1949, so nobody could ever think that Israel could one day come and attack the neighbors the way they are doing right now. That's why they are coming out strongly to condemn Israel, and also in the same vein to also condemn the Hamas. But they also wanted to tell, or they already informed their stand, especially to the countries that they have been abstained in this vote, because they said they wanted this country, Palestinian, to put up a structures so that by the time they are going to be accepted by the Security Council, so they have a plan or the structures of their countries, maybe who is going to be the leader, the government, even I think also the alliance, because this is what they want. This is what they are asking to be. Yeah, this is what the other countries, they are also asking them to put up a structure so that they know and understand who are the Palestinian, what is they stand for, and if they happen to be given the right to stand on their own, to make decision on their own, and who are they going to align with, and are the world going to also witness peace, because they are crying for peace for a very long time, because they are saying almost 75 years now they have been under the brutal attacks and apartheid regime of Israel, and now maybe if they happen to be given that right, who are the allies of the Palestinian? Who are the allies? So this is what basically other people who are basically coming from the countries who abstain, but the majority of the countries also whom we did not also expect, especially Poland, because Poland voted for the Palestinian state to be recognized so that the people can move freely, because they said that for a very long time they have been activating, or they have been fighting for the freedom of the Palestinian. So it's a good move, or it's a good feeling, because now most of the country, they also snap Israel, because Israel was behaving like is untouchable, and nobody could dare to discipline him, or nobody could dare them to come against them. But now this vote has indicated to them that you can have a friend today, but if there's something that is needed, if there's something that needs people's agency to solve it, regardless of who you are, they can stand for the people that are suffering in the hands of the Israel, because now Israel is also accusing Hamas that if Palestinian, they happen to be accepted, so that man who is talking right there is going to be overthrown and put on top of the roof, and the Hamas, they will install their leaders. So I don't know why he's also trying to give scenarios that even if it's happened, but maybe this time is different because of the structures that also Palestinians, they are being pressured to put up in place so that they can be given their freedom at last. But most of the countries, they have voted and they really condemned, especially that Israel, they really don't want to give access to the humanitarian aid to reach the countries, and also for the freedom of movement. And I think there will be no one who also wanted to continue being entertained by these Hamas-Israel stories. They really want to put an end to it, because as long as they believe that the Israel, they have the right to exist because of the way they find themselves also forming a state in another somebody's land. So if they could also come to their senses and said, when they came to Palestinian or when they came to Palestine, they were refugees, they were running away from the mass killing of the Jews. But this is exactly what they are doing now. They are doing opposite for what they have stand for, because they don't want to coexist with the Palestinian. But also for the people of Palestinian, they cannot also fold their arms and look back or watch what they are being pushed around, because even if these people, they are not also bombarding them with the bombs and whatever, but they are being pushed into segregation, or they are being pushed into small areas, while the Israel, they continue to occupy their land. And that is something that is really not acceptable. So everyone is looking forward, or every country who really voted for the Palestinian or who abstain for the sake of Palestinian. So they are really looking forward for the Palestinian finally to be free from the oppressions of the Israel and to be a state on their own. So that's a good thing. And thank you so much for watching. If you have watched up to this far, kindly subscribe to my channel, like the video, share the video to your loved one, and please don't forget to leave your comment down below so that we can continue in the comment section, and turn on your notification so that you can be notified whenever I upload a new video. And see you on my next one. Bye bye and bye.